Till 45, 50, but you still love it, enjoy it, 100% like you start that thing.
There was no news release included, or no dual training during public handshakes announcement. No gaudy, branded gloves. What it included with both flags was a 30-second clip that is more louder and simpler, shared on social media without any build-up, promotion, or caution. Only the cracking sound of gloves in the air, such as gunshots, and 46-year-old Manny Pacquiao aging like if he had never left the ring. The video didn't request approval, didn't hint at a return, or even bring up the world, but not who it was intended for. Didn't need a caption, because Manny, such as the boxing world's training, listens regardless if they want to do so. And all of a sudden the quiet around it felt fans that are louder than the pads themselves. Analysts were sacked when comment areas were overflowing. Off slow-motion malfunctions, and the previous champions used emoticons of respect like confetti, but one name stood out that hung at the periphery of each. Canelo Alvarez's chat isn't because he wasn't brought up because of Manny marked him, but at that same time, as the world saw a legend redefine 46. Each active champion was drawn into the orbit, particularly the largest one, and Canelo, however, did not publish a response. The video didn't pose a problem, and didn't voice the words out for sure. Still, something changed, because in the loudest declarations in boxing are occasionally the ones that are never spoken.
And suddenly, the silence around it felt louder than the pads themselves. Fans flooded comment sections, analysts fired.
Alvarez Canelo is not the kind to exaggerate. His legacy is based on consideration of quiet and poise and pacing that is more profound than most warriors' remarks he said at a press conference, fights, trash talkers, and many online calls without recoiling. Yet there was something here, not just noise. If not, the Pacquiao training video should have came with drama that wasn't necessary. Focus, which is what made it tough to overlook for a combatant such as Canelo, who has earned a living by controlling all iterations of contemporary boxing, from the body to the technical pressure, catching with accuracy. What he saw in that the footage was relevant rather than nostalgic. Pacquiao's footwork, pace, and the violence in each pivot spoke a Canelo's understanding of hunger. For that reason, the moment felt even without words. Private, because for someone such as Canelo, who lives in the area and trains at altitude between camps, a gym where people are infatuated with performance and detail, observing the legendary 46-year-old is still caring for the myths such as they stole something are not true. Struck like a stomach, it strikes like adoration. Look for the kind that produces even the most disciplined champions challenge their ceiling, that prevents you from turn aside to see whether. Canelo said it didn't matter if it was public or not, since the boxing community has already begun to talk. For him, he whispered inquiries and drew analogies, wondering if the calm respect across generations was really quiet or amazement that is even more intense.
Red, official weight 145, 3/4 pounds. His professional record, 50 victories, including 38 knockouts.
And
in a sport where boldness is the norm, a press quote follows each punch, and each remark turns into a headline. Canelo's quiet after Pacquiao's performance was loaded and not empty. This wasn't there was no beef to market during the bout hype. Pour blood to bottle, just the unfiltered results from a guy who, by all standards, ought to have decelerated years ago. And that's just why it triggered Pacquiao's nerves. Not only was his mobility quick for his age, his pace didn't increase throughout that intense moment. Seemed to be a recollection, a danger, and for combatants who are still engaged in attempting to establish their position in the sport, it served as a reminder that some myths never really leave the ring. They become into the atmosphere that is invisible, yet not. Disregard. Canelo, a guy who was once the standard, was abruptly measured against an immaterial object rather than a record, is a spirit watching, not a belt. Pacquiao blasts into combos using the rage he felt in 2009 wasn't related to in a fantasy matchup who would win. Was about who continues to endure the hardships of continues to practice as if it were day one, and the true comparison was found there. Drawn even if Canelo didn't say, even if his camp didn't say, anything, check out the fans' interpretations of the Canelo's video, was dropped by Manny. Silence emerged as the most talked about topic. Response in boxing.
By Manny Pacquiao in this fourth round, under a minute left. And there Pacquiao lands a combination.
There is an almost eerie quality about the kind of quiet because when a Canelo, the current champion, doesn't react to a situation when the whole sport is, it doesn't feel like buzzing over apathy that seems like a calculation, as perhaps even if he's watching the video a couple times in reverse locked doors, not due of a threat, but because he understands that most at first sight, admirers fail to see that Pacquiao's presentation was hardly flashy. At that time, was rhythm, and rhythm like that, obsession, not regularity, is the source of age. Canelo, whose rule has been founded on seeing a guy toss with control and accuracy, that level of looseness and rage might have sparked an interest that goes beyond rivalry that brought up memories of boxing was pure when warriors battled for the cameras, but due to their inability to halt moving. So maybe Canelo didn't say anything. Because maybe there was nothing else to say. His response manifested as movement in the discipline. He focused his efforts on the following the style of quiet respect in the morning that two real combatants could only share between generations due to Pacquiao didn't call anybody after posting that video. He didn't have to, since the video was a difficulty in and of itself, not to Canelo, but to the whole game as a reminder that greatness is trained, not faded. Sweats, it endures. And in that silence, Canelo Alvarez, seeing from afar, maybe uttered the most truthful thing of all, without ever speaking. And the fans couldn't understand that portion. Quit discussing it. Canelo wasn't what said that he didn't know the man who typically sets the mood in boxing, who takes over headlines simply by selecting a suddenly. His dancing companion was in the narrative's passenger seat rather than not because he lost, but because he fell off. But since a person from a previous time informed everyone of the true nature of raw hunger. Seems to be the kind of hunger that does not need a title or a contract on the line, consists of a fire, a trainer, and a gym. That will not die, and when that kind of energy doesn't impact the time frame. Just be seen, it is felt, and know regardless of Canelo's level of dominance, when a training video is released by Manny Pacquiao. Every champion is shadowed in this way. Even the boxing stars face briefly discussions that started as whispers. Would Canelo move like that at 46? Is this the reason he didn't want to? React not with disdain, but rather out of contemplation, since you see someone straining so hard that there is nothing more to demonstrate how it causes you to doubt your own. The fans weren't laced up for any reason. Seeking a falling out between Manny and Canelo, they sought evidence that someone at the top still gave a damn, and Canelo's quiet spoke a lot of things to a lot of individuals. It also stated greatness doesn't always have to be interrupted. You just observe, experience it, and take remarks, as legends themselves are aware of when another person enters the room.
Insane 10-punch combo.
Yep. Goes to the flurry again. Yep. Goes to the flurry.
And
That was, in a sense, what made the whole. There was nothing more potent. Formal connection between the two verified that there was no sparring throughout the training session. Not even taking a selfie at the gym. Imagination, supposition, and a timeline crowded with admirers piecing together, because times like these do just that. They generate conflict where none existed. Pacquiao didn't need to train as planned. He just needed to remind Canelo of the world what authentic training entails, and in the process, he unintentionally pushed the sport should reconsider its reigning monarchs. The comparison did not pertain to resumes. Was about work ethic, rhythm, movement, and when a guy of 46 may interfere with a sport that only has a 30-second, you can see it's deeper than the second clip. It's a gut check for nostalgia, and Canelo become a part of it whether he liked it or not. Of that discussion, as in today's a world of boxing where clout and callouts often surpass timing and skill, Pacquiao returned everything to its unadulterated state. Basics, perspiration, fire, and he phoned whether he intended to or not. Each professional athlete to the mat without uttering a word, so when supporters thought Canelo's first remarks upon seeing that film that they didn't think the media would see release, They didn't want a quotation. They were interpreting each other's body language. Time frames in which they were pursuing the instant the second was behind closed doors, where a proud, well-behaved champion saw something. It caused him to halt as well. Maybe all he remarked. Maybe it was a quiet damn. Only the reality that individuals are still inquiring, which is evidence that Pacquiao struck a chord with his art. Intended to. When the job is done, boxing doesn't need fanfare. Speaking, and that's just what took place. Manny Pacquiao did not train in this manner. A retired legend clearing the cobwebs, he didn't seem to be a legend on the loose. He seemed to be a troublesome person who wasn't prepared to solve as if time had not passed. Following him, but he wouldn't slow down. And that triggered a primordial instinct rather than just in supporters, but in combatants. Canelo Alvarez has dedicated his professional life to serving as the model for the gold standard, one that everyone else must meet, but someone for the first time in years smaller, older, and purportedly finished made everyone aware of that standard, how it used to seem when it was integrated gyms that are deserted and forged without cameras rolling, which is difficult to overlook even perhaps Canelo's. Quiet is appropriate for a winner. Was not evasion, maybe it was deference, or perhaps there was a reset in the back of your mind, because when you see someone doing the task such as not to prove, not to promote anything else than being so confined, it makes you wonder what it's all about. Really means the money, the belts, then none of the press trips are important if you're no longer infatuated with the suffering of the procedure, which is what Manny displayed. And for that reason, the world looked to Canelo without getting tagged at all because of fighters' movements like that. It makes everyone else think at 46. About who they will be after the lights. It was not fate that Manny Pacquiao trained with Canelo Alvarez, yet he nonetheless managed to in his mind. The best part is that there are no words involved. Were required. There were no rehearsed face-offs. Tension is a little instant of reality that broke through the cacophony and arrived at the essence of boxing as a sport. Didn't need a throw from Manny Pacquiao. Declaration of a return or hint to a rematch with everyone. That 30 was all that was required. Seconds of intense rhythmic attention to serve as a reminder that brilliance isn't constantly loud, but sometimes it simply seems wears gloves and behaves as if never departed, and whenever it does, it doesn't seem like a danger to the present combatant. While serving as a reminder of the craft's requirements of what it formerly took and of Canelo, how far have some people strayed from it? Has consistently presented himself as he is not a professional's professional. Spend time and effort on showmanship when the ring is where true power exists, yet even that discipline is put to the test when someone like Pacquiao returns to the spotlight, not using a microphone but using movement, and it was the most intense impact. Due to whether Canelo ultimately remarks or doesn't do this much, is the bar was already clear and did not rise. It abruptly returned to its previous residence. Far down the mill, not moving ahead, but backwards to an earlier reality that lives in the shuffle, the perspiration, and the sound of fists striving for excellence, and in fact, even the most talented athlete's star had to pause and pay attention. Because a legacy is more than simply a title. Battles, it's ingrained in your movement when the job continues even if the cameras stop. Pacquiao did not display an entourage because of this. Purity, no performance, and that's Canelo couldn't outshine that section. Not even with PPV purchases, but with belts with ranks based on weight, when the footage that was released, reminding the sport of anything more profound than a fixation with statistics for the craft, not the attention, and whether Canelo considered it a challenge, a silent call to action, or a tribute. Unquestionably, he sensed you becoming the face of boxing requires identifying storms when they occur, and it was thunder, not wind, in Manny's footage. Canelo turned into the mirror at that same time. Not the topic, The fans didn't inquire about Pacquiao's future-focused video, they inquired about the implications for Canelo's present, which is what gives this narrative its one combatant posts a quiet, so crazy training video and another that is maybe the best active boxer in the world is pulled into the story without making a punch. That isn't marketing. Pacquiao and gravity, if reminded everyone, whether on purpose or not, that his orbit still exists even after he retires, attracts the most well-known figures to its force field.
Let him loose.
Round 10.
Round 10 on
That level of gravity is uncommon for Canelo. He's used to being in charge of moving the needle, who determines when the discussion begins, who is included, and after it's over, but he wasn't the spark. He was the control. The bit that stayed was the echo. With them, as it was irrelevant. That it didn't fight when Manny was issued, that the press trip was not announcement. What mattered was not trash talk. What was important was the way he moved. Things he reminded in less than a minute. What would happen if effort were separated from ego? Seems to be, especially for a sport that often blurs the distinction between boxer and brand. Clarity like that strikes like a body. Nobody is claiming that Canelo isn't still elite. His resume is pound for pound, for he is in a class that only a select few may touch. Yet what Manny unintentionally revealed was at the portion of the soul that made the gloves. Of boxing that isn't available for purchase or planned, just observed, and now in action because he roused a latent element in the conversation, the kind of buzz that doesn't question who will be next, but what's true, and all eyes instantly turned on Canelo. Not for a pulse, but for a battle date, for publicity, but as evidence that the sport's even today's rulers continue to train like their throne isn't certain. And maybe that's the actual lesson in 30 seconds everyone became admirers of. Manny Pacquiao. Critics and supporters examine themselves, and among them is Canelo Alvarez. And maybe that's what makes it so brilliant. Not during the performance, but during the repercussions due to Pacquiao's lack of to utter the name of Canelo in order to create the whole boxing community asks, what does he didn't need to tag him? Did Canelo think? Stand next to him or work out with him? Just have to move while perspiring. Laboring as if he were possessed, and Canelo abruptly joined the dialogue. Whether he like it or not, that is the result of legacy not being stuck in the past. But actively Pacquiao's breathing in the present didn't just remind others of his identity. Warned them of the reality of grandeur. Greatness never dies. It just finds novel approaches to becoming unquestionable. Canelo's whole career has been molded by demonstrating he's outstanding and deserves to be at the top. Doubters united in their disagreements and kept quiet. Legends. But he's now being likened to a ghost that doesn't go away, nor a comeback fighter is not an act of desperation. Remind yourself that Pacquiao's training video didn't change the ranks, which changed the environment, as well as inside that atmosphere. Canelo's quiet seemed to be more than humility that evoked a sense of respect, because regardless of the number of belts you own, there's a hallowed quality about observing a man strives for excellence, not because he needs to, but he still wants to, and that reality reverberates more loudly than any Pacquiao is the irony that Punch could ever didn't have to provide any proof, but he's shown everything without a call-out or title. Just work unfiltered and raw on the line. Surgery that sliced through several years of retired as if it had never occurred, and he didn't only reveal in that rawness the difference between himself and the average immediately. He started a new discussion. About the true definition of devotion. Canelo abruptly lost all of his dominance. Felt human, not inferior or undeserving, but grounded due to the fact that seeing a legend at 46 move with that kind of fire doesn't make you feel ashamed. It humbles you to observe in silence, into considering whether you've been doing enough, even at the highest level, which is why Canelo didn't remain silent, because he didn't. It was the answer that he didn't leap to protect his reputation without coercion. A post into the story because he didn't have to, and it wasn't about dominance, was about being there, and Pacquiao had the quiet type of everything that may be ordered without validation, the type of long-lasting attentiveness when the video concludes. So when viewers said Canelo's first remarks after his camp with maybe they were mistaken, Manny Pacquiao because there were no words to acknowledgement of one excellent observer of another, and understanding that sometimes the finest strong responses are the ones you maintain to oneself. Canelo may never discuss it since he doesn't due to his training. His performances, his legacy has already been inscribed on the bones of contemporary boxing, but stitched in the same story, there is a quiet voice of a 46-year-old specter who has never really abandoned not to compete, but to remind but also to threaten that in this greatness in sports is not based on hype or age. It concerns who continues to appear when the cameras switch off. When Pacquiao appeared just once, for a short moment, though when the whole world stopped, Canelo, this era's uncontested king, halted with its not out of rivalry or fear, but out of appreciation and respect from something more profound than words.